Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Surrounding the Dragon. I'm psyched for today. It is my first guest episode, and I couldn't think of a better person to have as my first guest than my friend, Anna Hartman. Athletic trainer, overall just awesome human, big heart, brilliant. We call her Yoda, and by the end of this podcast, you're going to see why. Anna Hartman, welcome to the show. Let's surround the dragon.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so stoked that you're doing a podcast. I know we talked about, I encouraged you to do it when you were a guest on my podcast.
Yes, you did.
And that was the episode that we recorded, was the name of it, Surrounding the Dragon. And so I just love that you took that and ran with it. And
so yeah, good. It was. We have to credit Anna with the little kick in the pants that I got to get this project started. And, for a long time, I've had people, in my ear about, Sara, you got to start a podcast and all this. And, I dragged my feet like, oh, well, what if nobody listens to it? And all the, what ifs that go through my brain. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to do it. I have a lot of things to say. I know a lot of really cool people to have on here to talk to. And here we are. So we did that. For a long time, I was like, what would I call my podcast? Right. And for a long time, it was in the back of my mind, Surrounding the Dragon. And so when it just naturally came out in the episode that I did with you, it was like, that was like the nail. Of course it's going to be Surrounding the Dragon.
Because you said that and I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. That's going to be the name of this episode.
It's such a good name. There's so much to it that we can explore, right?
Yeah.
So before we get into all the good stuff, I would love for you to take a couple minutes here and let the people know who you are and don't hold back.
Mm-hmm. It's always the toughest part, right?
I know.
Who am I? Anna Hartman is my name. I was just going to start a rap, like something is my game.
Yeah, go for it. Hey, good vibes here.
I don't know how to rap. I don't. It's just in my head I do. It's It's like watching sports, right? Like in your head, you're like, oh, I can do that. And
right.
I can literally feel myself do it. And then I try to, and I'm like, nope.
Harder than it looks.
Turns out, actually, I feel like I've recently realized that the reason why I probably am like that is I have a very strong, photographic memory, which means I'm really good at imagery and visualization. And daydreaming, those kind of things. And so I'm and really imagery is you creating an experience or a memory of something.
Yes.
And so it feels very real to your brain. And I was like, oh, I think that's why I feel like when I'm watching my athletes on the track or, jumping or playing football or things, I feel it in my body. It is a part of it too, is I'm super empathetic, but I think too, because the part of my brain that is involved in visualization, which is not necessarily the visual part of your brain, it's a different part of your brain, is very strong. And so I'm like, oh, no wonder I feel like I could do that. But then when it comes down to my body actually coordinating it, those synapses are not quite there.
Right.
So, but anyways, that's kind of a sidetrack, but a little bit about who I am. So yeah, I'm a athletic trainer, as you said. That's my main profession. That's the practice act I practice under. But my business, Movement Rev, teaches other practitioners, whether it be athletic trainers, physical therapists, chiropractors, acupuncturists, massage therapists, strength coaches, all the people that sort of work with other people for their health and wellness. I work with those individuals. I teach my methodology, which is a very holistic approach to movement and injury and just wellness. And then I also still work clinically with people, and those people are professional athletes. So I travel with a few athletes throughout the year during their season to keep them healthy. Currently, I always get asked what sports currently, mainly NFL athletes. And then I have a track and field athlete I travel with as well, who actually does both NFL and track and field. And in the past, though, it's been baseball players, NBA, MLB, golf, literally all the types of athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Worked with some special forces, military type athlete people as well. And so it's kind of anybody at that sort of elite level is pretty much who I've worked with my entire career. So I am, gosh, 22 years in being an athletic trainer. And yes, the whole 22 years I've worked with elite level athletes and operators and people. And so I've had a very unique career path, very non-traditional the whole time, that I've sort of just created on my own. And which is a little bit like, I did this podcast actually a while ago now with Shantae Cofield, the movement maestro.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked me to sort of reflect on like all the things from like growing up to college to grad school to professional. And that was the first time I realized like, man, I've been like creating things and doing my own thing since I was little.
Yeah.
This is not a new thing. It's just like a part of who I am. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting just to like realize that and see that. And it's like, oh, no wonder I ended up sort of like as an entrepreneur. It's because like I've been doing that my whole life, like I just have like a name for it now. So yeah, and I love what I do. Movement Rev is 10 years old this year, which is crazy. And
wow.
Yeah,
I remember when you started Movement Rev at your little spot in Scottsdale.
Yeah.
And here you are,
Yeah.
crushing it.
10 years ago.
10
Yeah.
years ago. Yeah.
It's crazy too. Obviously there's just very much like iterations of, yourself throughout your life, but then like even the business, it goes through that sort of like, there's many iterations or growth phases. There's like some uncomfortable times, and there's like a little bit of time where you're just kind of figuring out who you are and what you want to do and like how you want to do it. And like, a little bit of it is like not so much of even you figuring out, but like listening to the people who come to see you and who like to learn from you, and like letting them sort of show you what you're good at, and leaning into all of that. And so
Yeah.
that is like, even though Movement Rev is 10 years old, like it's really still like a baby in terms of like my impact on the industry, I think, because I'm finally figuring out like what it is that makes me and Movement Rev so unique, and then how to teach it to everybody else and like grow it and scale it and like freaking. And then the coolest thing that's happening in the last couple years has been, as I've leaned into that niche and leaned into like what I'm good at and what I have to teach and my unique methodology, is other people are so excited about Movement Rev and so excited about Movement Rev methodology and like the locator test assessment protocol that they want to grow it. They're invested in it. And that is like, when you start a business, you never really think anybody is going to care about it as much as you. Like, you just don't think it's possible.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you realize that there's a lot of people out there that care about it as much or if more than you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like a really like emotional thing, and like I feel so grateful for it. And then I kind of laughed. I was just telling my friend Darcy Norman the other day, I said, it's funny that I realized that I had that belief that nobody would care about Movement Rev as much as me, because like we worked at Exos, originally Athletes Performance. When it was Athletes Performance, we were like the original crew. And we all believed in Athletes Performance and its vision so strongly, right? We believed in Exo so much that we like were a big part of growing it and like creating it. And so I was like, it's funny that I thought it wasn't possible for other people to believe in Movement Rev as much as me, when I was doing that exact thing, at Athletes Performance for Mark. And so it's like, I had evidence of it, yet I totally forgot about that.
Right.
And so it's really cool to see that starting to happen now in my own business. And so knowing that, and then finally being like aware of like, yeah, I witnessed this all happen at Exos. Like, it's super exciting to think about what's to come.
And you kind of have this idea based on how Exos modeled their growth you know, it's like you have this beautiful whole infinite space of where you can take Movement Rev. And I very much am grateful for you and Movement Rev. You've been such a huge influence on me in my life and in my career, both, personally and professionally. I'm so grateful that I have you in my life, but just to witness your growth and just to kind of sit back and just be the observer of your process, and even just like with your podcast and with the content that you just consistently crush every single week. It's like, that's not easy to do, Anna.
No, it's not.
It is not easy to do, and you do it so beautifully, and you just bring it every time.
That.
And I'm invested in Movement Rev's growth too. I want to see you. I just think the world of you. You know that.
Yeah.
And it's from a clinical standpoint, yes, of course, I've learned so much from you. And a lot of what I do in my clinic is heavily influenced by what you do and all the things that I've learned from you over the years. But, it makes my heart happy to see you where you're at right now, knowing, the journey that you've been on for the last 10 years, and to watch it all unfold and to see where you're going. It's like, it just makes my heart happy. I'm so happy for you and proud of you and all the things.
You. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And that's something like we met 20 years ago, right? I was an intern at then Athletes Performance. So I got a little, I was a fly on the wall. I got to see a little bit about that, but like that energy, to see the cohesiveness of that original team back then, it was like, it's no wonder it was successful. It's no wonder that they turned out some of the best athletes in the world, right? Because the team behind it was so all in and passionate about what they did. And, there were some heavy friggin' hitters on that team, right? Darcy being one of them, And
it's so funny, like looking back to it, like, man, in the moment we had no idea. I mean, we had an idea. We knew obviously when you're on a team like that, like you feel it. You feel the
flow,
familyness of it, and the excitement and the energy and the drive that everybody has. But it's like, you didn't, at least for me, like I didn't realize how special that was until we didn't have it anymore. And then it was just like, wow, what a magical thing to be a part of at the very beginning of my career. Like,
and that's something like you'll always have. Right. And you'll always have that feeling to reference. Right. And I'm very much like you talked about, like the evolution of business and the evolution of clinical practice, and just like even evolution of personal growth too. It's like, I'm very much in that space too. I'm an acupuncturist, but that doesn't at all describe what I do. Just like you're an athletic trainer, but it doesn't at all even come close to fully describing what it is you actually do and what you bring to the table. It just doesn't.
Title, it's like very similar, like our name, like, I'm Anna, but that doesn't tell you who I am or what I do or what I'm passionate about and what makes me tick, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's important to like communicate, like to kind of like start a starting point and figuring it out. But I'm like, there's so much more. There's so much
more. And so as I am like exploring this as part of my expression of who I am and what my clinical practice is, right? This podcast, it's like, I'm kind of circling around that area where I'm yes, I'm the acupuncturist. I do sports medicine stuff, but I'm also really passionate about like the emotional and the spiritual body, and getting in tune with that and figuring out how we can embody physically the unseen aspects of the human experience, right? The human body. And so I think, surrounding the dragon, that's what we're all about. We go into the unseen. We go into all of the things that commonly go overlooked and under considered. And one thing that you just said, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think something too, like, to kind of bring it back to the business thing is like the act of creating content and like speaking on who you are, who your business is, like forces you to do that personal growth work, right?
For sure.
It is like,
Yep.
I think I always tell people, like, whether or not you want to like make money on Instagram or make money on a website or make money from anything online, the ability to have a platform, even with podcasts, the ability to have a platform to like create and to put your thoughts out there and to help formulate your thoughts is like a rapid way to figure out exactly who you are and what makes you unique and what makes you tick, and even
Yep.
to kind of figure out like where you want to take things. And it's
Right.
like people like wonder like how I got where I am in. Like, well, starting to like I really leaned into creating content in 2017, and that like the growth since 2017 has been so much more rapid than any growth before that because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the act of actually putting it out there,
Right.
whether anybody actually reads it or listens to it, is like actually not my goal. It's like
Right.
it's like an open
Get the
journal to
reps.
figure things out in my own head. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Get in the reps and then fine tune as you go. Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, here we go.
Love it. All
Let's
right,
do
go
it.
back to what you were talking about.
Yeah.
The
No, that's
surrounding
great.
the
That's
dragon.
first just surrounding the dragon. Like just
But
keep
that is like
going.
a little bit of like the surrounding dragon of like all the little things that go into figuring out your business or figuring out who you are and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out who you are as a clinician. Like one of the tools that you can use to actually do that is creating content. Like so
Right.
many people don't create content because they're like, I have nothing to say, or I don't know how I feel about that subject yet, or I don't know
Yeah.
like if I'm the
It might
expert.
not
Like
get
who
likes.
cares?
It might not get heard. It might not get
Exactly. Who
shared and all
cares?
the
Put
things.
it out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Anna, I am very much entering my golden girl era,
Yeah.
meaning I don't
Yeah.
give a fuck
Yeah, I know
anymore. Like,
exactly what I mean. Yeah,
I just don't. Like, I'm just going to say what I'm going to say. I'm going to do what I do, and people get better.
yeah,
If people want to get on board and listen to what I have to say and engage with me, come on, let's go.
yeah.
Let's create this
Right.
community and like explore more together. But like,
Yeah,
I'm just, I'm getting there.
yeah.
Wherever
I love
there
it.
is, I'm getting there.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, one thing that you mentioned just a little while ago is imagery,
Mm,
right? And using that part of your brain to like tap into.
yeah.
How would you say that plays into your clinical practice and the way you work with your patients? Like, do you talk to your patients about like going there in their mind's eye in terms of performance, in terms of healing, in terms of recovery? How does that fit in for you?
It does. It does, and it doesn't. I mean, depends on what there's so many different ways that visualization and imagery can support someone
Mm-hmm.
in what they're doing. So I don't necessarily talk about it in terms of like their performance, though I sometimes, those kind of topics sometimes come up, and I usually like encourage them to be working with like a sports psychologist and that sort of
Mm-hmm.
sense of things.
Right.
But even too, sometimes I will get at them for using imagery to cultivate awareness in their body and to evoke certain movements in their bodies or certain experiences that are in their body. It's a little similar to the visualization they would do with like the sports psychologist, but more on like a global level of sometimes like not sometimes when we move, especially when we're moving in a sport environment, like in the performance, not necessarily the training for it, but like in the rep. So like if you're
Yeah.
a long jumper, like when you run down the runway and jump, I don't want them thinking about like, okay, head here, neck here, posture here, tighten the abs, do like when they're thinking about those sort of internal cues, they actually slow themselves down. Like thought is um, from a neural like transmission standpoint, thought is really slow. Cognition is really slow.
Mm-hmm.
But feeling and emotion are fast, especially
Yes.
emotions. And so
Mm-hmm.
if I can get them to like evoke a feeling or evoke an emotion that goes with that rep, then inevitably it's probably going to be a better performance.
Yes.
And so part of that too is realizing that when they're focused on like what doesn't feel good in their body, which is a default, by the way, people shouldn't feel bad about um about like being negative about how their body is, or like speaking in negatives of like describing things as tight or like painful or pressure or those kind of sensations,
Mm-hmm.
it shouldn't feel shame that you do that. That is our default mode network in our brain, like keeping us safe. Like that is
Right.
just how our brain works, that we always default to this negative.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a choice to realize that that sometimes doesn't serve us, and when we're trying to create a better movement experience. In fact, when we're trying to learn a new movement, we need to have it associated with a positive emotion and a positive thing. And so if I could get them to even describe the way their body feels in a more positive way, in more positive terms, then it's the movement is more likely, or the posture is more likely going to stick and be remembered. And
Yes.
so, you know, a little bit of it is like, maybe policing is the wrong word, but like highlighting to them, like pointing out when they slip into that negative and the default mode of like, oh, that rep felt like horrible, like I'm terrible, right? Like
Yep.
they'll say things like that and not realize that has effect on their performance. And so it's just like, I'm often just like, can we reframe that? Is there a way we could say that differently that would, and then I don't tell them like that should make your body feel better. I'm like, how about you try this rep and reframe it in a different way, and then
Mm-hmm.
do it, and then come back and tell me how that felt differently. And then
Mm-hmm.
when it feels differently in a positive way, I'm like, isn't that interesting? Like,
Right.
let's practice that instead. So
Yes.
yes, I do use that a lot. And then in general, um, whenever I'm teaching them any sort of movement or giving them a movement intervention or even a manual therapy intervention, I want them to take a second to highlight the attention to their body, to see how they're feeling, like to see where they're starting, because the whole point of an intervention is to create change that we like.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you don't know where you're starting, then after I'm done with the intervention and I ask you to check in, you have no reference point. And so you don't know if it was a change that you liked. Could have been a change that you don't like.
Right.
And so taking a moment for them to do a little body scan or do a little inventory on all their parts, or just a movement, whether it be a squat or bending over or rotation or shoulder flexion, something simple like that, so they have a starting point, is super powerful.
Yeah.
And because that information is always getting taken to your brain and your spinal cord. It's
Right.
just we constantly have all the information from our receptors coming in our body, and if we had to pay attention to all of them, it'd be like in the movie Bruce Almighty, when he like, right, he starts hearing everybody's prayers to God,
Yes.
like as he is, you know, as he becomes almighty,
That's
he hears
such a good
everything,
reference.
right? And it's like
Yeah.
he's like, oh my God, stop, right? And so
Yep.
if we constantly were aware of all the information coming to our body,
Yeah.
that's how we
Yeah.
would feel. So our
Right.
brain knows that and automatically filters it.
Right.
And so, but it's also like, that's why spotlighting your attention on it, it's not like it's new information. It's just you're telling your brain like, let me feel all the messages from my skeleton. Let me feel all the messages from my feet, from my back, from my whatever, right?
Right. Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's Yoda for you, ladies and gentlemen. Like the Bruce Almighty reference. Like, yes, that's what
Yeah.
happens, right? It's like, but this, I think that's a great highlight too, Anna, because there's a lot of things that reside inside of here that we're not necessarily conscious of. All that
Mm-hmm.
unseen stuff that, you know, coming from various parts of our lives, childhood, you know, whatever, that, you know, it kind of gets stuck and like shut down.
Yeah.
And the underlying like subconscious unseen aspects of our bodies, things that get stored there, it can impact a lot of things. It can impact our sleep, in our performance, in our, you know, how much stress we're
Absolutely.
carrying in our system, right? And we may not even be conscious of it. So it is important to think less and feel more, right? Develop that skill of listening and feeling in the body, because the body knows everything,
Yeah.
right?
Everything.
Like it's a beautiful structure. And I always say this kind of jokingly. It's like, if there's such thing as perfection, if perfection
Yeah.
exists, it is the human body.
Yeah.
It's the nervous
100%.
system,
Yeah.
right? It's like, it's so perfect the way that it works, the information that it allows us to access consciously and subconsciously. It's just, it's
Yeah.
an
Any like
incredibly,
living sentient being, like to a
yeah,
higher degree. I
right.
mentioned
And
humans, like that's a very human centric point of view, but yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And I
yeah,
like
yeah.
that you said that we default to what's wrong. That is so true.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't, we can't
It's
beat
by
ourselves up.
design. It's not only okay. It's like,
Right.
yeah,
Because why? Number one is safety and survival. That's
yeah,
the priority,
yeah.
right? So everything that I want to do, and you do this too, it's like everything that we do with our clients aligns with safety and survival. Like we
Yep.
want to partner with the system so that we can encourage it to do what it does naturally without forcing it to do
Mm-hmm.
what we want it to do,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and so, what are some ways that that you do this clinically? Is listening to patients' body and or encouraging patients to listen to their bodies? How do you do that?
Um.
That's a
Well,
big question. I
it's
know.
a big question.
Sorry.
And it's different. Well, it's the same but different, even too, like how I support safety in the body or
Mm-hmm.
survival, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's so related. Like every time, like again, not to bring up another podcast episode,
It's
but like
okay.
uh, I
Go for
had
it.
I had Nicole Cozine on as a guest in one of my episodes. She's a pelvic floor physical therapist, and that's a type of clinician. You know, she does internal work, and obviously too, when it comes to the reproductive organs and the sexual organs, like there can be a lot of like shame and fear and anxiety and like trauma associated with that, or that area of the body.
Yes.
So so it is so important for someone to feel safe, like throughout their whole experience of an appointment there. And now anybody, it's important to feel safe when we're supporting our health and wellness and our recovery and healing. But it was really highlighted with that conversation with Nicole is because I was talking about how when I'm interacting with a patient, like how I'm sitting next to them on the table or with them on the table, like what I'm doing with my hands, like how I am in my own body. I'm looking at body language and social cues from them, and I'm helping to co-regulate with them, just like you would with a little baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Yes.
trying to set the stage for them to feel safe. I can't make someone feel safe. I can only give them my safety to feed off of.
Right.
It's still up to their body whether they can co-regulate with me and feel that safety. At the end
Yes.
of the day, only they can feel safe, which is why I like on the internet when people are like, it's a safe space, I have a safe space for you, I'm like, that's not
No,
how it
you
works.
don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not
Right.
how it works.
Right.
So anyways, I was sharing about that, and Nicole's like, oh yeah, like at the clinic, like from the minute, like from the phone call, like we are doing these very specific things to make sure that we are like, you know, giving them as many cues of safety as we can. And she's like, the
Yes.
way the waiting room is set up, how they're waiting in the waiting room, like knowing that people with pelvic floor pain can't sit sometimes without pain, meaning that the receptionist needs to be like, hey, I'll let the person know that you're here for your appointment. Feel free to stand or sit over here.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you say sit over here, some people are like,
Ugh.
okay. And then you've just made them feel threatened because you're putting them in their position of pain. And so like,
Right.
excuse me, little things like that just set the scene for the environment. When
Yes.
we can make the environment as safe as possible by setting the scene or taking into consideration what might feel threatening to someone, or watching their body language and realize that their body is going to tell us when they don't feel safe, not
Mm-hmm.
them. Nobody's going to be like,
Right.
I don't feel comfortable seated. Like some
Right.
people will. But
Sure.
most of the time, you'll see the person sit down and they're like, oh God, this is so painful. And so it's
Right.
like in that moment, maybe you didn't offer them to stand. In that moment you see that, you could be like, oh well, you can stand too if it's more comfortable, like,
Right.
or there's
Yeah.
pillows over here, feel free to make yourself as comfortable as you need to,
Yes. Yeah.
and so like those are little things too. Like I always say that too, even with like propping on the table. Like I'll offer someone a pillow and they'll say no. They always will say no, but I still give them the pillow and slide it over under their head. I don't accept it as a no until their body tells me it's a no. If I put a pillow under them and they look more uncomfortable, yeah, I take the pillow away. But most of the
Right.
time I put a pillow under them and then they're like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
so that's a big part of it. So that's a big part of like the creating safety, and that is a way, like that is how I'm listening to their body, is I'm paying
Yes.
attention to their social cues. Now, if
Yes.
I'm not regulated in my own body, I'm gonna have a harder time picking up those cues. If
Yes.
I right, like if I'm not very good at like paying attention to how I feel in my own body, I can't do a very good job at seeing how someone else is feeling in their body. Or
Right.
if my hands on them, if I'm touching them, I have a hard time feeling what their body is telling me. If I have a hard time feeling in my body, that includes my hand.
Right. Yeah. I
So,
mean, your guard will be up, right? Like
yep,
if you're not centered and grounded,
yeah,
right? There's going to be a threat to your system, right?
yep,
You're going to go into fight or flight protection mode,
exactly.
right?
And
And
this
so,
is
yeah,
like,
you can't feel anything when you're in
yeah,
that mode. Yep.
and this is like what comes up too, like when I teach people my methodology, like because it is so like ingrained in the nervous system and this safety thing, and realizing that their body is the smartest thing in the room and it has so much to tell us if we just could listen to it, if we could
Mm-hmm.
just feel it. um it ends up, I always tell people, like whether you signed up for it or not, this is a journey into personal development, self improvement, because this is a journey of like letting go of your ego being the driver of the bus.
Yes. Ah,
Right. And so this is
yeah.
like the hardest thing for clinicians to learn as they go through the locator test assessment protocol, as they go through the methodology, is like realizing that it's okay to be wrong and there actually isn't a right answer. Like, and we're so used to, as like being the expert, like having to provide a right answer, that we
Mm-hmm.
just give people stories about their body, which may or may not be true. And so it's like, that doesn't serve anybody.
Right.
And
Right. The patient
once
has
you
enough
let
stories
go,
on their own, right?
exactly. Once you let
Yeah.
go of like the need to be right,
Yeah.
you step into the drive to be curious.
Yes.
And when you're curious, you're more open to seeing these like safety signals and like tapping into that. And that's where the power of like healing happens, is when
Yeah.
people feel safe, when their nervous
Exactly.
system is safe and their
Yeah.
parasympathetic nervous system can be driving the bus and regulating all the functions of their body to promote this self-healing capability.
See,
So, but
so
it's like
beautifully
it's
articulated.
like, to go back to your question, it's like
Mm-hmm.
it is seeped listening to me listening to the body, and then teaching the person how to listen to their body is like, it is
Yes.
always happening. Yeah.
Constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly. Same thing in my clinic too. I always say, like, the the treatment is part of, or the environment is part of the treatment, right? Like when people walk into my clinic,
Absolutely.
like the table is part of the treatment, the music that I choose, it's part of the treatment. It sometimes
Yeah.
I'll play, sometimes I'll play a singing bowl or a
Yeah.
drum or something to set the tone or to like change the frequency, but we know that your brain is scanning the environment for all the information, right?
Yep.
So let's use the environment to our advantage and create that, in that safety that we know their nervous system is kind of by default searching for.
Yeah.
And so I like to go there with all senses too, like as many
Absolutely.
senses as I can, right? So like I don't like a lot of clutter in my clinic. Like I don't like things out and around
Yeah.
because it's like too chaotic. It's
Yeah.
too much,
Right.
right? So it's very minimalist. And again, the type of music that I select for a particular patient is entirely based on what are we treating?
Right.
What are we trying to accomplish out of the session?
Yeah.
Right? Is it?
I think too, like, with that said, like, because like
Mhm.
a lot of the times the question that comes up from people is like, well, I work in a facility that like I can't change the environment like that. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
yeah, but there's things that you could do to still um to still help your patient orient themselves so they feel more comfortable and they can sort of predict what to expect in the environment, right? So like
Yeah.
a good example of that is like at, you know, when I worked at Exos, is like there was constantly like weight dropping on the ground, barbells dropping on the ground, which I'm used to. And so my brain filters out. Like I can hear a barbell drop and it doesn't bother me. But someone who's not in that
Sure.
environment, they're like, what the fuck just happened?
Right.
And
It's
so if you
startling.
even start the appointment by like giving them a tour of the facility so they can see the weight dropping a little bit and be like, hey, yeah, this is the weight room and there's going to be weights dropping on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it sounds like. Or, you know, like this is the music that we normally play and this is the sound of the music and I can't change it, but we can like maybe go in like we can change where the table's at and be in the most
Right.
lowest possible area. Or even too,
Right.
like in those scenarios of like if you do a nice tour of the facility and that's still not enough for the person to like look like they're feeling safe, then you got to know the areas of your business that you could take somebody in a mobile table to or a mat
Yep.
and like create a different experience. And so it's
For
like
sure.
at Exos, like I knew there was the massage room that was quieter, that was an option. There's like a private treatment room, that's an option. If those aren't available, we got the pool deck. There's a
Mm-hmm.
shaded spot on the pool deck. There's
Yep.
a spot behind the batting cages that if nobody was using the batting cages was kind of nice and quiet under the trees. Like, you know, you got to know the areas of your environment that you could use if you needed to, if the situation that you normally had for somebody was not available.
Right.
And another way to do it is to tap into like the little like neuro hacks. I hate using that word, but it's
Yeah,
kind of
me too, but I get it.
feeling it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yep.
like if somebody's like super stressed out and like when they come in, sometimes the easiest thing for me to do, you know, those people too, they come in and they want to tell the whole, they're like talking. And
Uh-huh.
so I sit them down on a physio ball and they get a physio ball and I get a physio ball and I start bouncing. And then they
Yep.
start bouncing because people mirror each other. That's just how we communicate.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden their story just loses energy as they bounce.
Yeah.
And it's the exact same thing you do with a baby.
Yes, you bounce them. Yeah.
You bounce them.
Yep. You
Right.
bounce them.
So we
Yep.
can do that. And if you don't have a ball, you can, the person can lay on the table and you can move their limb.
Rock them. Yeah.
Rock them. You can move
Mm-hmm.
their feet, rock them, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
can use little tricks like this to like do exactly what you would do for a baby.
Yeah, for sure. And I have acupuncture as kind of my secret weapon. Like I can throw some needles in their ear and just have them sedated in like 5 minutes. Right. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And one thing that you mentioned too.
There's certain same thing. There's certain manual therapies
Yeah.
that I'm like, well, I know as soon as I put my hands in the spot, they'll relax.
It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right. They'll feel like they'll co-regulate with you faster when you have your hands on them. Right. Like
Absolutely.
you'll have that energy exchange. But you know, part of the environment over at Exos too, like it's like a seamless experience there where like the therapy and treatment area is there's no separation between it and the performance area. Like, and that's part of the magic. Like that's part of what makes them so good at what they do. And that in and of itself, just like the methodology and the thought that went into that, like there is no wall between therapy and performance, right? Like the thought that went into that is very nurturing, I think, because you know, it's part of the bigger picture. And that alone, I think, can be very, very comforting.
Yeah.
Knowing because they're on that table, they're like, wow, like I'm in the best place with the best people and like I'm taken care of here.
Yeah, for sure.
You know? So even if it is loud, if it's like all of that, it's like knowing that they have the best of the best serving them, like that can be really
absolutely
relaxing.
And that was like built into the design of the facility too, right? Like when Mark designed it, there was a work side of the facility and a rest side of the facility because of his like saying work plus rest equals success. He like modeled that in the architecture and the design of the building too.
Right. So, yeah, I remember that. They have like it's labeled on the walls, right? Work over here and rest over here. And you know, there's some fun sprinkled in there too. Like they've got some fun.
Yeah.
They got some fun in there too. Cool. Yeah. Well, that was just a beautiful exchange. Thank you for that.
You're
so
welcome.
Beautifully articulated, my friend. So I was on social media and like I do, I like to interact with my people on my stories. And I posted yesterday hey, I'm going to have Anna Hartman from Movement Rev who wants to ask some questions. And so I have 3 questions that were submitted by my followers, and you up for taking some questions?
Do it.
Okay, so the first one, let's start with this one. I'm assuming this is in reference to acute injuries. The question is verbatim: ice or no ice?
Yeah, I'm an ice fan.
You are. Oh, I didn't think you would be.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more.
I am an ice fan. I had like a whole post on this. Wow, maybe I need to reuse the content.
Yes,
But,
you do.
Ice has got a bad rap because of its like effect on healing, and I see that. I understand that. However, you cannot, like, ice as an analgesic is undefeated.
Yes, true.
Undefeated as an analgesic. And sometimes people are in so much pain and they just want to feel better. And sometimes that pain is creating an environment that is decreasing systemic blood flow and lymphatic flow, right? Creating tightnesses in places that are decreasing the fluid flow. That if we could just stop their pain, things would be better. And so so to me, the potential for a decreased healing because of that is greater than the small amount of reduction of like healing that the ice does. And so I'm like, no, I'm going to choose ice. But how I choose it for an injury is if somebody's like, oh, I just rolled my ankle, what should I do? My question to them is it painful? How painful is it? Is it super painful or just swollen? If it's super painful, then I'm like, ice it. If it's just swollen, then I'm like, well, no, ice is not going. Ice has never. This is like, people are like, oh, ice doesn't help swelling. Yeah, it's never claimed to help swelling.
Right.
Like, that's never been, it's like, this is why you use me.
It's been part of the RICE protocol. It's kind of lumped in with everything.
But at no point has ice ever claimed to decrease swelling.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, so if you don't have pain, don't use ice. So this is why I'm like, yes, use ice if you're in pain. Most people that get hurt are in a high amount of pain. And so you can do some other things to try to help the pain, like skin stimulation and like gentle movements in other body parts. You can do smelling with aromatherapy. You can do some other stuff.
Yep. Topicals
but you know what's undefeated and the quickest thing that you can do is ice.
Yeah.
So it's like, to me, it's like a silly thing to not use ice because I'm like,
if there's pain, I like that.
You're worrying about the wrong thing. Like,
yeah.
I'm like, ice is super great for decreasing pain. Now, from a so for acute injury, if you have pain, like ice, please use ice.
Well, you're going to follow it up too, and this is going to get into the next question that I have. Yeah. But something special about you is your swelling protocol.
Yes.
Right? Because you're going to hit them. You're going to hit them with that.
Yes. I was like,
right?
Yes. Then the next problem, we got to get the swelling out of there. Because
right. Yeah.
The misconception people have is how much swelling is actually needed for the healing to happen. And if people knew how little amount of swelling is actually needed for the wound approximation for the wound healing to occur, they would be shocked. It's little, it's teeny bit of swelling. It's not the amount of swelling that we normally have.
Right.
The amount of swelling that we normally have and we think of associated with injuries like an ankle sprain or like a knee sprain is because that fluid is getting trapped. And it's getting trapped because systemically something is putting a kink in the hose, or systemically the whole flow system is turned
it slows down. Yeah,
exactly. And so
we need
to support that to decrease the amount of swelling so the body can choose how much swelling it needs to. And it's just like stability, right? The best form of stability is as much stiffness for the anticipated load, right? Not too much, not too little.
Right.
Perfect amount.
Just enough. Yeah.
Just enough. Swelling's the same way. The body can determine the amount of swelling, but the hint is it's not too much and it's not too little. It's like just the sweet spot. When it's too much, it actually decreases the healing. When it's too little, it decreases the healing, right? So Ice
And
is
it's like a
not
flow,
strong.
right? Like you have,
Yeah,
it's a dynamic,
absolutely.
yeah, like one day it's going to be
Yeah,
over here, another day it's going to be something different, and it's like you have to
exactly.
stay on
And
it.
the best indication on if our fluid flow, lymphatic and blood flow is supporting healing and recovery,
Mm-hmm.
and like and where that sweet spot is in swelling, is there a distal pulse noticeable or not?
Yes.
Right? So you'll
Yeah.
know if it's an adequate amount of swelling. If it's like not a ton and they've got good pulse, then I'm less concerned about the swelling at any volume with no pulse
Right.
noticeable or a
Right.
diminished pulse.
Right.
So
Yes.
that is like the key here.
Distal
And I'm,
pulse, just hold on for one second, just
okay.
because a lot of my, not a lot of my listeners are clinicians.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Pulse
So
far away from your heart.
yes. So distal pulses, meaning pulses that are closer to your hands or
Yes, wrist
fingers
and
and feet,
ankles.
right?
Yeah.
Far
Mhm.
away, right? Far away
Yeah.
from your heart.
Yep.
So if we know that, if we can feel these pulses and they feel, you know, if they feel, if we can even just palpate them,
Yeah.
that is a positive sign that we have flow,
Yes.
right? If we don't feel the pulses, well, that tells us, okay, well, there's something somewhere along the way, to use your terminology, Anna, there's like a kink in the hose,
Yep.
right?
Exactly.
So we have to go find where that hose is and open all the
Yeah.
systems and all the things, right?
And
Now,
it's
for
and it's
from a Chinese medicine standpoint, with ice,
yeah.
ice
Yeah.
is a huge no-no with
Yeah.
acupuncture and Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
Like it's been like for
Or like
centuries,
eating
like
cold
ice is
food,
like,
right? Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. And so like from that standpoint, from a Chinese medicine standpoint, ice slows everything down.
Yeah.
Ice, well, we know that, right? That's physiological, not just Chinese
Yeah.
medicine, right? But
Yeah.
it creates stagnation. It
Yeah.
almost it presents an opportunity to create that like kink in the hose,
Yeah.
right? The ice can be that. But I really like the point that you just brought up. It's like, if there's pain,
Yeah.
why not use it? Like, because we
And
have other
especially
ways
like
to surround the dragon to address the swelling,
exactly. I was like
right? Yeah.
use it for pain, but then also still do all these other things
Do
to
all the
support
other
the
things.
healing.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the thing is too is like for me, like I gotta like I think about like what tools do you have to use? If I get hurt, I've got a bunch of tools that I can try before ice if I wanted.
Yeah.
If my sister rolls her ankle or like my niece rolls her ankle, they don't have a whole lot. They don't know the body very well. They don't have a whole lot of tools. And my
Mm-hmm.
niece is freaking out because she hurts. Like,
Yeah.
just
Ice.
grab the ice.
Yeah.
Like, the
I
ice
like
is
that.
like, it's so powerful. And like,
Very
this is
good.
like, sometimes I'm like, people, like, you're focusing on the wrong thing.
The wrong thing, man. Yeah.
And it's just one
Well,
of those things is too is like don't take away a tool that is like so useful, but
yeah.
like you need just better tools to do the rest of the stuff like we're talking about, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
so and that's the thing. So the other like with ice too, I think too when people ask about ice, at least in my role, a lot of people like a lot of athletes want to know what I think about like cold plunging
Yes.
and using ice from a recovery standpoint
Yes.
and and then too like what's so famous now with the Wim Hof
Uh-huh.
breathing stuff using ice from a like nervous system support standpoint.
Yes. Yes.
So I definitely have opinions on that. From a recovery standpoint, I think it's like less supported than it is for pain.
Mm-hmm.
On that standpoint, I always tell people like try it out, and if you feel like it helps you be more recovered, then that's you listening to your body.
Right.
Don't believe me because I said it is or isn't. Like, do your own
Trust your
investigation.
body.
How do you feel? How do you function after doing it? Better,
Right.
same, or worse? Like, you might find that sometimes it will change. Like, your body always has permission to like have a different response after a different intervention. We are literally a different person every day.
Right.
We're a different
Yep.
shape. We are different energy. We're different every day. And
Yep.
so one day the ice bath might feel great and another day it might not. So listen to your
Right.
body. And like what you'll probably notice is you have a cycle throughout the month or the year that
Yep.
sometimes it feels good and sometimes it doesn't feel good.
Right.
So that's that. And then when it comes to like the Wim Hof stuff, like I just I think like if people actually this is the problem with sometimes social media and stuff too. Like people see it
Yes.
on social media, so they think that's what you need. I'm
Right.
like, no, the ice is trying to create a stressful environment for you to then use your breath to control. And so
Yes.
it's like, it doesn't have to be cold. It can be anything you want. It's just
Right.
the quickest way for you to feel uncomfortable is to put you in freezing ass cold water.
Right. Yes.
So, but it's not necessary to get the benefits of the breathing. The whole benefit is the breathing, not the ice.
Right.
And
Yes.
then the last bit is ice on
Mm-hmm.
the face.
Oh,
So the
uh-huh.
dive reflex. So that is
Yes.
powerful. So ice on
Yes.
the face to facilitate a dive reflex to change your respiratory rate and decrease your heart rate. Yes,
Right.
that works. And
Yep.
so that can be a tool to calm down when you're in a stressful situation.
Yeah. And it
Just
works
like your
so
breath
good.
can you be a tool to calm you down in a stressful situation.
For
For
sure.
some of us, controlling our breath in a stressful situation is not possible. So a
Mm-hmm.
simple way to do it is your face with the
Yes.
cold. And it can be a cold roller or it can be a ice bath bowl.
Yes.
It can just be a cold towel on your forehead.
Yes.
The other thing too is cold on your face. Not only does it have that nervous system response, but from a thermoregulation standpoint, it cools us down fast. Putting our
Mm-hmm.
hands in cold water and putting our forehead in cold water is a really quick way to cool our core temperature.
Yeah. I love that.
So
Yes.
so it's one of those things that like ice, yes and no, depending on what
Depending
you're
what it
using
is.
it for, and like
Yeah. For sure. And then, with cold exposure, I love cold exposure, right?
yeah,
In moderation.
yeah,
It's not, and in different variations. I'm so glad you brought up the cold water on the face,
right.
because that's all we need really for cold exposure. We don't
Yeah.
need to be fully submersed in,
No. And then
32
even
degrees
then, like
ice
I said
water.
too, like listening to your body, because some days it's going to feel great and helpful, and other days it's not.
It's not going to feel good, right? And
So
and
having some flexibility and like permission to not have to do it all the time
right.
is, I think, the key.
Yeah, and I think it's a big mindset thing too, because
Yeah.
there's people who they wake up and they're like, if I don't do my cold plunge,
I'm a
I
terrible person. Yeah.
I'm a terrible person. I don't work hard. I'm not unworthy, and I'm this and I'm that, and I'm not as tough as, the outside world thinks I am. Like, no, it's like, you don't have to do it every day. You actually, especially women,
Yeah. Going back to what you're saying with
you
the
know,
cold,
you
you
have to be
probably don't need
careful
to do it
because
every day.
cold can get in and wreak havoc,
Yeah.
right? If there's cold that enters, I would call it the lower dantian, right? The pelvic floor. If we get the element of cold up in there, well, that is something that can lead to things like fibroids and infertility and all of
Yeah.
some, female health issues. So
Yeah.
it's really important to be mindful of what your body needs and, the state of your own nervous system. Like if you're someone who's not practiced in cold exposure, and you're someone that's carrying a ton of stress, and you decide to go fully immersed in an well,
Yeah.
you're not necessarily helping yourself. It's
No.
just like movement. Like, you got to figure out what
Yeah.
variation
What
of cold
movement
exposure
works the
aligns
best.
with you the most, so that you can
Exactly.
get the benefit without overdoing it
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
without
Like
putting
for
yourself
me,
at
like
risk.
I already have like a ton of, like my cortisol is like always through the
Yeah,
roof.
we don't need
To
any
add
more.
more stress to the system. Like,
Yeah, right. It's like the whole point is to de-stress, right?
yeah.
To remove some of the unnecessary stress that
Yeah.
is just
But
kind of bogging us down.
but then it's like listening to my body. There are times of the month and I'm like, fuck, I'm hot as fuck and I need I need cold
Yeah,
water.
it's
I
cold
need
exposure.
cold. And so I'm like,
Yeah,
go in the cold one.
balance it out.
Like
Yep, I'm
having the
with you
tool to like quickly feel less warm is
for
so
sure.
helpful.
Yeah.
And I think, oh, I was thinking of something else when you said that too. Shoot, I don't know. It'll come back.
Yeah. Well, that was really good.
But
I
I
like
mean,
that.
it's just one of those things that it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it always goes back to like this feeling of people feel like there's a right answer.
Right.
People
It's a
want,
dynamic answer.
yeah, people want
It's
absolutes and things are relative.
right.
Always going to be relative.
Yeah. It's like we can't cookie cut the solutions. We can't do it. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not a cookie cutter thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great answer to that question. I thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I think we covered the second question just in that answer already. The second question was, can she, meaning you, Anna, share a little bit about her thoughts on healing and recovery vis-a-vis swelling reduction protocols?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's get into that a little bit.
Well, I think too, I even
A
had
little
a
bit more.
post yesterday that was about this, like, the swelling reduction protocol, you know, even though I talk about it for swelling after, like with injuries or congestion in your lymphatics, like I could have easily called it like the healing promoting protocol or the recovery protocol, right? Because at the end of the day, what's going to help us recover and heal on any level, whether it be from an injury or from our health and like general disease processes in our body or sport or whatever, is going to be supporting our function of our fluids. Like our fluids is what provides the life force to our body and provides the healing cells to the area, like to like create new tissue and then also get rid of the garbage, right, and the toxins. And so any way that we can support the blood flow and the lymphatic flow, we're going to support healing in our immune system as well, because our immune system is so tied into our lymphatics as well, and our blood flow, right? Because like our immune system, 80% of it's like in our gut, but if our gut's not getting good blood flow to it, it can't function very well.
Right.
And so it's like, again, kind of all goes back to blood flow, honestly. And so like to me, the swelling protocol and why I probably named it that in the first place is like the problem I had to solve was my football players having sprained ankles on one Sunday, but needing to play on the next Sunday, and the team not being able to help them. And so I started doing these things, and I was like, fuck, like we're getting rid of swelling like overnight. Whereas when the team assessed them, they were like, oh, you're going to be out for 4 weeks based on the degree of ankle sprain.
Right.
And we were able to get them back the same week. Right. So I saw it as a swelling protocol because that's how it first came to be.
Wait a second. Can we just celebrate that for a second? Like that's how powerful Anna is, everybody.
Not just me.
And her knowledge and all the things.
Not me. Like this is a thing.
I know that. Yeah. I understand that. However, you deliver. You got it. You figured it out, right?
I mean, and then with the athletes I work with, some of them get paid regardless, but when we look about the value it provides to the team, right?
Yes.
You're paying that athlete, one of my athletes, like $1 million for that game.
Right.
So they thought he was going to be out 4 games. That's $4 million that they would just pay him to not play. And so it's like, no, we got the swelling down within a day. And then he felt, functionally fine and was able to play. Right. And so that,
everybody
saved
wins.
them $1 million.
Right. And that probably got him, put him in a good position for a future contract.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. For sure.
So, like being able to like decrease games lost to injury or practices lost to injury because of stagnant swelling is, I think, huge.
It is that powerful. It is that powerful.
But, so what I saw after a while too was like the same principles of the swelling protocol I was using just with general treatment. And then, when I first realized like how powerful of a tool it was for healing was when I had a few different people with bone like fractures that had required oral, that doesn't make sense, that had required external fixation or internal fixation, right? With screws and stuff like that eventually the doctor wanted to take out, but when they would re-x-ray the bone was still showing signs of not healing. And so the person was like, okay, we got to stay in this, we got to have these hardware in us for even longer, which the body doesn't like foreign substances like that in it in the first place. And so it's like not ideal to keep hardware in if we don't have to. Right. And I implemented the same sort of parts of the swelling protocol, but on them restoring their pulse to the distal segments. And then they went back to the doctor, and the doctor took an x-ray and was like floored at the improvement in bone healing.
My
And that's when
gosh.
I was like, whoa.
Yeah. How powerful is that?
How
That's the
powerful.
body. That's the
the
body doing its thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's really when I realized that. And then too, like, it's no secret that from a recovery standpoint, the tools out there from a recovery standpoint are like compression socks and the Normatec boots, or like other pneumatic boot type things, or legs up the wall, or the little Firefly like stim devices to pump the lower leg muscles to help pump the fluid, right? So every recovery tool on the market facilitates improved blood flow from the lower extremity, from the distal ends back to the proximal.
Yes.
And so I'm like, you know, and that too, even going back to the cold as a recovery tool, the thought process originally with like a contrast bath is you're encouraging blood flow to the skin and then to the, you know, back and forth between the skin and the depths of the body.
Yeah.
You're facilitating blood flow. So blood flow is the component for recovery. And so I'm like, yeah, this is exactly what the swelling protocol does, is blood flow, lymphatic flow. They work together. They're the vessels that work together, and they
really,
you know, the blood, the toxins and the intracellular, you know, fluid is getting in the veins and then transported into the lymph to be disposed of. So it's like they always are like this. There is not a time that the lymphatics and the blood flow have not been hand in hand. And so it's like you can't treat one.
You can't do it. It's like blood and chi. For those of you who don't know that, blood and chi from acupuncture, it's like they are inseparable, right? Blood carries chi through the body, and chi is what moves your blood. It's like they are inseparable, and it's incredibly nourishing. So that was another great answer. Love it. And you're so right on. You're so right on. The body, it really is miraculous in how it heals itself. And you said, Sue, like, you said it's not me, right? Like, we are not healers. People call us healers, right? Like, people come in and they're like, oh, Sarah's the wizard and this and that. Yeah. Like, it's not me. I am not the healer. I'm a healer in the sense that my body heals itself. Yeah. You know, and
your patient is the healer.
Right? Like, and you are your own healer. Like, people, you are your own healer. You just have to, you know, it's important to get in tune with all the things, all the magic that your body is capable of, right? And one of those things is just partnering with the nervous system, understanding how to influence it in various ways. And so when one aspect or one tool or strategy becomes unavailable, you have so many other things to choose from, right? Which is a good segue into this next question, Anna, the third and final question. This is a fun one because the person who submitted this question to me on Instagram is a former patient of mine. And she knows my answer to this question. And so if I don't answer it the way, you know, in full integrity and in full honesty, then my rapport with her goes right out the window. So I will be very honest with what I'm about to say. But I'll ask the question and I'll hear your answer, and then we'll get into my answer. So, what is the most unconventional exercise you suggest for your patients?
Sarah and I talked about this before we started recording, so I know what answer that
Should we just go there?
I'm like, we can, because I don't necessarily, here's the thing. I don't have necessarily like an unconventional exercise. I think the whole approach I have to exercise
is unconventional.
Movement, or like helping the body out, because I don't call things exercise all the time because I'm like, they don't qualify as exercise in my mind. Right. So I might say a movement drill, or a nerve, like a stimulation or a sensory experience, or like like an that's why I end up saying intervention a lot, because it could be manual therapy, it could be exercise, it could be movement, it could be
meditation,
it could be so many things. So whatever intervention I give sometimes feels really unconventional to people, because I'm giving the onus back to them, and like actually asking them, how do you feel before and after, and did it make a change that you want? And if it did, let's keep doing it. And if it didn't, then who am I to think that was a good intervention for you? Throw it out and try something else.
Right.
So I think that in itself is pretty unconventional when you think of how the world of like corrective exercise and like
Yes.
interventions usually go. I don't have an answer. And then also I don't have an answer because where your body wants you to start sometimes is very different than where you feeling the problem. And so,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, like for some people, their
Mm-hmm.
leg pain, I might have them start at the liver, or I might have them start at the lung, or I might
Mm-hmm.
have them start at some nervous system type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where a evaluation comes in handy, because I have a set of tools with the locator test assessment protocol or with my hands that I can figure out where the body is directing me to have the best response.
Mm-hmm.
In the absence of that, I'm always going to sort of default to parasympathetic drivers to the nervous system, because the parasympathetic nervous system is a part of our autonomic nervous system that drives the boat, that or the bus, or you know, is in charge,
It's in charge.
and
Yeah.
specifically in charge of healing and recovery and decreasing pain.
Yeah.
So, and that's
Right.
where
It's all
Sarah's
about the
answer
brain.
comes in, and sort of like what she was going for with this unconventional thing. And
Yeah.
we can talk about that because I have a lot to say on that.
Great. Well, let's not keep them in suspense. Yeah, this is a bit of an unconventional at home. This is not happening in my clinic, people. It's an at home self care strategy, and it's for a very specific demographic. Like I do work with some professional athletes, but for the most part, I work with general population, active adults. But this particular strategy, I kind of reserve for a very particular demographic, women over 40.
I think it's good for everyone.
I think, no, it is great for everyone, but it's just like the appropriateness of having this conversation. You know, I have to have great rapport. You know, again, I only bring this out when it's appropriate for the patient that I'm working with. And up until this point, it's always been women over 40, which, Anna, you and I fit into that category. I'm just,
Well, I'm
saying.
like, and this is like, again, Sarah's dancing around it. It's having,
I know,
and putting
thank you.
priority on that. But, and this is what I mean, like, it's important for any age, is because
Yeah.
it is an expression of our best health, is when we have a good, healthy libido and sex drive, and also are having an orgasm, because that is a nervous system experience that actually integrates parasympathetic with sympathetic, a very nice healthy balance of this freeze mode and play mode. That is like so important from an autonomic nervous system standpoint. And
it's like a reboot.
Right. And so it is something, and I think when Sarah and I talk about this, I'm like, wow, I wouldn't even have thought about that. But because how I was raised is, we did not shy around conversations when it came to sex, when it came to pleasure, and like masturbation was not seen as like a shameful thing. It was
it's not.
a very healthy, normal thing.
Absolutely.
And to the point that my mom made us feel uncomfortable, because she's like, do you want me to show you? Or like, I'm like,
no. No. Yeah. No. Yeah.
But also it's like, no, I didn't even think about that as a thing, because like, you know, too much.
Nobody thinks it.
Maybe for some people, but masturbation has been like a important part of my life.
It's huge. Yeah. I mean, it's too powerful to not talk about. I can't understand why more clinicians don't go here with their patients when it's appropriate, of course, you know. But, you know, for a lot of my patients, they're all injured or they have pain, and they can't go and get their high intensity exercise the way that they typically do. So the amount of stress that they're carrying in their body is, you know, tends to, you know, become overwhelming. And women over 40, like, there's a few things that they don't have enough of. They don't eat enough protein, they don't lift heavy enough, and they don't have enough orgasms, right? And so, and there's a lot of research too and I'll send you this research study that I had on orgasms just before bed. It was like the outcome, like on the low end of improvement, was 75% improvement in sleep quality for women over 40 who had orgasms just before bedtime. 75%. Like, that's huge. And so for me, I just had this conversation with a patient last week, actually, who fit that demographic. And it's like, it's working, right? So if we want to break a stress pattern, if we want to flood our body with all of like these endogenous endorphins, all the things that really impact every single system and structure and function in our body in a positive way, like why not tap into it? Why not use it? Partner or no partner, like go for it.
Yeah.
And for me, like my approach with this, it's like, it's not about the orgasm. It's not about like, that's just like a bonus. Like that's just for you to, to enjoy. It's like, it's what happens on either side of the orgasm that I'm using this for. It's like, once we achieve this, heightened, elevated experience, our body just gets flooded again with all of these endogenous chemicals that just make us feel great and regulates everything. And all of our pleasure centers in our brain light up all at the same time, right? So that in and of itself, totally worth it. But on the other end, in order to get there and in order to have this elevated experience, especially for women, we have to carry a certain amount of safety and presence in our own bodies in order to get there. For some women, it's like easy and often, but it's not always easy for a lot of women. And like you mentioned earlier, like sometimes there's some trauma and there's some shame and there's a lot, any number of things that can inhibit this experience.
Yeah.
Right. And feeling safe in this.
I'm
and
like,
so,
man, society from the get-go, like,
yeah. So
if not to feel safe in our body because they say something's wrong with our body if it doesn't look a certain way. And so
right.
Like,
and so when I give this as an at-home strategy, it's really, it's a practice of presence and safety in the body so that we can get access to the nervous system. The experience itself, like that's just a bonus. Like go ahead and enjoy yourself. Again, partner or no partner. It's like, I will say though, the husbands usually love it. Like my patient, like she comes back, like she checks in every like 2 months or so. She comes in for a follow-up session and she's always like, so my husband's been on me about like, so when are you going to see Dr. Sara again? So, everything gets better.
Yeah.
When we take this route.
One of those things too, that I think, you were kind of saying it, like part of the emphasis too, is like, if you are able to orgasm and have the benefit of the post-orgasm from a neurochemical standpoint, like great. But even if you can't, because there's so many people, like the percentage of people that actually can't orgasm is very high.
Yes.
And
right.
So it's sort of like right out of the get-go, you might not be able to, but there's value in the journey of getting there.
Yes.
And like Sara said, like feeling safer in your body, but then just the areas that you touch, whether it be your genitals or not.
Yeah.
When we touch our skin in a very like light, like, I want to say like petting, but like a very grooming, sensual touch is, facilitates our interoceptive receptors in our skin. And that actually goes into an area of your brain that is part of your limbic system that is related to your safety and survival too.
Yes.
And you're just feel good. It's a very parasympathetic experience through exteroception. Well, it's interoception through exteroception on our skin, but it's an interoceptive receptor. So it's through a sympathetic like nerve.
Yes.
But it ends up being a parasympathetic response because of where it goes into the brain. And so you can, part of what Sara is talking about is feeling safe in your body. If the area of your genitals don't feel safe, you can start with other body parts and touch them in a like sensual, soft, gentle way and have the same effects. And start to feel safer so that maybe when you do get to the areas of the genitals that are also parasympathetically sort of connected a little bit more, maybe you'll be more likely to have an orgasm too. And so I think
there's a lot of layers to this.
Down a whole rabbit hole of like sex therapy and and I am not privy to it. I had I was at a conference or like workshop, I don't know what to call it, like a seminar, I don't know, that Allison Tenney put on years ago. I don't even remember what it was called. This is terrible. But anyways, one of her guest speakers that she had for one of the breakout sections was Dr. Yusi. Dr. Yusi, she's on Instagram. It's U, like YOUC SEE Logic, UC Logic. So Dr. Uchenna Ose. I think is how you say her last name. She's a physical therapist,
Mm-hmm.
pelvic physical therapist, but she
Mm-hmm.
also has education in sex therapy. And
Great.
her whole breakout session was on like orgasm,
Yeah.
sex, sensual touch, like how important it is, how
Mm-hmm.
little people are actually having orgasms.
Yeah.
It's very men and women. It's not just a man thing. It's not just a
Mm-hmm.
woman thing. Like it's both. And then how to be with yourself and how to be with others, and different body parts, different experiences that you can do without even being sexual or intercourse
Mm-hmm.
related, that
Right.
can actually facilitate these wonderful feelings in our nervous system and promotion of safety and improvement of libido and like general health. And so it's
All of
like
it.
there are people
I
out
love
there
it.
that it can help,
Yep.
um,
But like for
because it
right
is
now,
such a
like generally
fundamental
speaking,
important piece
yeah.
of our health and wellness. Like,
Oh, it's huge.
and like we were talking about, like
It's so huge.
because like society like traditionally puts so much shame on anything sexual,
Mm-hmm.
as being like promiscuous, especially women talking about
Women,
sexual
right.
things. Like,
Right. Oh
there's
no,
nothing
God
wrong with it.
forbid.
It's part of normal health and wellness is
Right.
having
It tells us a
libido.
lot about what's happening in the body when it's
Exactly.
not working, right? When you're not feeling it, it
Yeah.
tells us a lot. Like in Chinese medicine, we look at the tongue to
Yeah.
find out what's happening internally. We
Yeah.
feel the pulses. We talk about poop. We talk about menstrual cycles. Like
Yeah.
all of these natural functions in the body tell us a lot about what's happening and
Mm-hmm.
how we might be able to help them. And libido is a huge one.
Yeah.
Um, both from a diagnostic standpoint and from a therapeutic standpoint.
Yeah.
So like
Mhm.
we can very much use it. And that is, I would say, my most unconventional
Yes.
at
Definitely
home.
unconventional, but probably should be more conventional.
You know what? I'm not afraid. Like when it's appropriate and when I feel like, the rapport is there with my patient to have the conversation, like I bust it out,
Yeah.
and it works and it's so powerful and everybody needs a little vitamin O. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why not? Can't hurt. So with that, Anna, that was such a Yoda answer that you
It was.
gave. Yeah, it was so good. Like you tied it right into science and anatomy, and I love you. It was so
At the
good.
end of the day, that's what it is. That's like
I know that's what it is,
survival,
but it's
right?
like,
Like when
yeah,
the whole thing is like a whole organism, the way we operate is survival, and from a
yep,
macro level, survival of the species has to
yes,
rely on sex.
yep, you're right.
And so it's like, no, it's actually one of our
It's
primary
primal.
things that we need. And so
Yeah,
that's actually, so like the way that I know that your people are not necessarily clinicians, but like the
yeah,
way that LTAP is set up, like Nicole and I were talking about on the podcast, is like priority organ hierarchy, priority of,
mm-hmm.
and the pelvic organs are
Yes,
high up there because
yes,
they are responsible for survival of the species.
right.
Now we have so
So
many
so
people in
important.
the world.
Right, I know.
We don't all
Yeah,
need to reproduce, but
right.
also like it's still
It's primal. It's
evolutionary, very high priority to our body.
yes,
And so
beautiful.
everything associated with sexual health and reproduction should be prioritized,
It. I agree, and I
whether you
think
want to reproduce or not.
right.
Yeah.
For so many reasons, and we could keep going for hours and hours, and maybe I could do like a whole podcast just on this topic
I mean,
alone.
you probably should.
I probably should. So if anyone listening to this, if you want to hear that episode, make a comment on whatever platform you're listening
Yeah.
to and let me know, because there's so much more around this particular topic that we can talk about. But for now, Anna Hartman, thank you for being here. Thank you for surrounding the dragon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime. And I will mention, we're recording this only a couple days before a big day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Happy birthday to Anna in
Tomorrow is
2
my
days.
birthday.
Oh, August 1st. Yeah.
August 1st.
August 1st. Well, happy birthday, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And how can people get more of you? Where can they find you?
Pretty much on any social platform at Movement Rev, all one word, movement, and then REV. That's the best way. Movement Rev.
Great. And you have a fantastic podcast also that's available on YouTube and
everywhere.
Apple, everywhere.
Players and YouTube. Yep. The
Yep.
podcast is called Unreal Results.
Definitely worth a listen, whether you're a clinician, a therapist, or even strength and conditioning coach, if you're in the industry, go give Anna a follow and start consuming as much of her content as you possibly can. Your patients and clients will thank you for it. So
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks for being here. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode. And we'll see you on the next one.